Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining our first How to Do Research and Get Published webinar of the year. Today's topic will be how to support your students through the publication process. But before we get started on the bulk of today's presentation, I'd like to introduce you to our team. First, Jessica Offenberger is a publishing editor on the STM Journal's editorial team. She manages a range of science and medicine journals, working with editors and societies to develop new strategies and problem solve. Jessica has a background in project management, marketing, business development, and self-publishing. Next, Dr. Mary Seabrook was a senior lecturer at King's College London, where she published in the field of medical education and reviewed papers for a number of academic journals. She co-ran a writing development program within her department to, to improve the department and colleagues' publication records. More recently, she worked as a freelance education advisor and then as an education developer back at King's, during which time she published two books, How to Teach in Clinical Settings, published by Wiley, and Introduction to University Teaching, in its second edition from Sage. And next, Dr. Kevin Keene is the editor-in-chief of Toxicologic Pathology, the leading journal in the scientific discipline, and official journal of the Society of Toxicologic Pathology, European Society of Toxicologic Pathology. Dr. Keene is employed by Blueprint Medicines, a Sanofi company in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where he is responsible for the company's non-clinical pathology portfolio. Dr. Keene is a fellow and former president of the International Academy of Toxicologic Pathology and is very dedicated to providing ongoing education and training opportunities to practitioners um, and related scientists in the field. And last, I'm Sean Scarsbrick, a senior marketing manager on the community engagement marketing team at Sage, and my primary role is to provide support to authors and reviewers as they move through the publishing process. Now, first, I wanted to share with you our guest speakers, the work that they're doing, the excellent work that they're doing. Please feel free to consult these if for anything you have an interest. We will send links to these after the call. If you are an interested author, reviewer, or a reader, definitely consider these. Throughout today's call, you'll see the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Please send us your questions. We will address as many as we possibly can live at the end of the call, but if we do not get to your question, we will follow up in a blog post afterward. Now, just to situate us generally about the typical life cycle of publishing, here we go from the very start to the very end of securing funding to resubmission. And as mentioned today, the goal will be to talk about how to support your students get through the publication process. And with that, I'm very happy to pass it over to Jessica.
Thank you, Sean, for kicking us off. So thank you, everyone, for being here today and Happy New Year. We're excited to talk about some of the challenges that emerging scholars and students have specifically in research and academic publishing. So as you can see here, most of the common barriers include a limited understanding of publishing norms and expectations, so not knowing what to expect, how to proceed, how to write a manuscript, how to select a journal, and what to expect as the manuscript moves throughout the publication cycle. There's often anxiety about rejection and lack of confidence, which we'll dive into today, and difficulty translating research, like a dissertation or thesis, into publishable manuscripts. So while our focus here today is on how faculty can help students and emerging scholars, this can be applied to anyone across the field. We can all be mentors to those that may be looking for some extra guidance and need help to navigate the publishing process. So for the sake of today, faculty can help by normalizing the challenges and sharing their own publishing experiences. I guarantee you, as a student, you are not alone in this limited knowledge and anxiety around the publishing process. We've all been there, and we have a variety of resources that your institution and your faculty and mentors can provide, as well as publishing houses like Sage. You can offer structured guidance on timelines and milestones. Webinars like these, the How to Do Research and Get Published webinar series, is a great resource. We have an extensive webinar library of different topics, everything from how to select a journal, how to write a manuscript, how to secure funding, all the way to conferences and networking. Um, as a faculty member or a mentor, you can provide a safe space for questions and iterative feedback, being available to answer those questions that someone may not always feel comfortable in approaching others, and then sharing resources. So that's a big part of today's call. Next slide, please. So just to elaborate, some of the aspects students specifically struggle with include selecting the right journal, um, preparing manuscripts, understanding peer review and what that process looks like, and managing revisions. So you as a faculty member can provide a curated list of reputable journals and discuss journal scope and audience with students. So we actually have an entire webinar dedicated on how to select the best journal, but you as a faculty member have discipline-specific knowledge, subject-specific knowledge in the journals that are most relevant to your students in the field. So if you have a list of journals that you continually work with or that you publish in or read, you can share that already with your students. Having that recommendation is huge. And then also helping students better understand journal scope and audience and how important that is into finding the right home for their research. In terms of actually writing the manuscript, this can be incredibly daunting, especially after you've spent years, months or years conducting that research. So sharing templates and examples of successful papers, pointing students to the author guidelines. The author guidelines have clearly outlined the type of manuscripts that they accept, those article types, and the structure that each journal requires. But then there's some overall templates that might be most relevant to your discipline. And then at your institution or organization, you can offer writing workshops or peer review groups. Conferences are a great place to find these type of workshops as well at society or association conferences that happen annually. So you can partner people together to help work on these type of skills. Understanding peer review. Uh, this is often one of the first places where students start to get involved. They might shadow a mentor or faculty member, someone more senior in the field, to do the peer review process alongside them. So you can explain the process and common reviewer expectations. You can do a role play of reviewer feedback sessions to help build that resilience and communicate expectations. We also have some great webinars on how to conduct peer review, and we have an entire gateway of reviewer resources on how to conduct peer review. But students won't always know where to find those resources unless they're pointed to them. So sharing that with your students and helping them better understand the process is a great place to start. And then if and when a student gets to the revision process, helping them understand what to expect in that revision stage, how they can address feedback point by point, and going through those revisions step by step, and what journals will expect when submitting that revision if they make it to that stage. I wanted to briefly touch on converting dissertations into manuscripts because this is something we often hear students come to us with questions. How do I condense my large body of work into an article or multiple articles? So, as a faculty member or mentor, you can go through and help students in identifying publishable sections, as I know that we reiterate every time, you're not going to just republish your dissertation or thesis outright in a journal. It's going to be way too long and not relevant to that particular journal audience. So looking at what is most relevant and what can be republished. Um, You'll also want to check the journal author guidelines to make sure that they do accept dissertation-based articles. So SAGE's very author friendly in that manner. And so most Sage journals comply with that. But it's always good to double check before you make a recommendation to your students. And you'll also want to provide examples of successful transformations. So maybe one of your previous students went on to defend their dissertation, and they ended up publishing it into a manuscript or multiple manuscripts. So one of our recommendations is to break down the dissertation into smaller and more thematic papers to potentially get multiple papers out of that. We don't want a salami slice and just get a paper simply for the sake of publishing a paper. Um, but if you might be publishing a literature review first, and then you might focus on the original research, uh, what have you. And then you'll also want to encourage co-authoring opportunities for collaborative learning. So students will often not publish entirely on their own. They'll often partner with other co-authors, whether that's at their institution or maybe there's an organization that you're working with at another institution. And so having those co-authors available to them really provides a valuable experience, and they'll be able to learn new perspectives, gain additional insight, and learn from others, not just you as their mentor. So I feel like we could talk about this for the entire time. I won't belabor that. Um, but there's a few practical tools and resources that you can share that will be incredibly helpful for your students or other emerging scholars. So if you're based at an institution or university, the library has a vast amount of resources available. So look at what resources your institution has available, whether that's writing centers, library guides, librarians who can help you research and find the best articles and access different databases, um, webinars and workshops that might be hosted, enrolling in those, or maybe there is even a mentor and mentorship program available to you through the institution. You can also connect students with professional networks and conferences. Um, being able to attend conferences and various association annual meetings is a great opportunity for networking and learning opportunities, attending sessions, uh, to connect with new speakers, learn about new topics. But then many conferences will also have sessions on how to publish an X, Y, and Z journal or how to conduct peer review, and have different writing workshops that might be available to you. So those are great opportunities. There's often travel and grants that are available for these type of conferences, especially to students. So not for all of them, but look into those opportunities. Um, you can offer mentorship beyond the coursework. So a lot of these students are publishing with you as part of their courses, and maybe that's part of their dissertation, but it's great to extend your time and your expertise beyond the traditional coursework. And I know that they will very much appreciate that, especially as you go, as we're building up that next generation of researchers. You personally can create some checklists for submission readiness. Sage actually has a submission checklist available on our author gateway. And then you can provide access to citation management tools and style guides. We have a couple different webinars on this, and we actually have a webinar coming up in November on various resources and tools that can really help with your research process. So that will be another great resource. And then, just like we try to do with all of our team, is to work on confidence building. So, celebrating those small wins, and encouraging a resilience and growth mindset. So, whether a student has had an abstract accepted at a conference, or is actually doing a presentation at a conference, or recently completed their dissertation and are now looking to go and publish that work. Celebrating those small milestones along the way is a huge confidence builder and something that we should all strive to do with our students, because we all know rejection is common, and part of the part of the course that we all have as researchers. So celebrating those small wins when we can is important. Just briefly before we dive further, you might be asking, what is a mentor? So a mentor is someone who advises and helps somebody with less experience over a period of time. And this can be a fixed period of time or something ongoing. It could just be for the duration of when you have them in your class, or it could extend beyond the semester. So a lot of programs, some programs have formal guidelines and rules and practices and ethical standards that they follow. Other times it's informal and it can vary. Um, so it really depends on what the mentor is looking to provide. So then who serves as a mentee? Next slide, please. Sorry, just kidding. I got ahead of myself. So, a mentor, um, this is someone that is transformative. It's more than just coaching and supervising someone, and it's helping someone meet goals. So it's really peeling apart the person at its core and looking for revealing and nurturing their strengths and potential. So when you're working with your students, it's not just a transactional, I help them complete this task, check, move on to the next. But really thinking about the overall big picture and their goals and what they're trying to achieve and how you can best support them and nurture those strengths and potential. Mentoring is cyclical, so you probably once started out as a mentee. Now you might be at the mentor stage, um, but that evolves. We can always continue to grow and learn and change. So even as you progress in your career, you can still have a mentor. There's always someone and something that we can learn from and grow and change. And we can also continue to give back and help mentor someone else. So it is cyclical. It's not just a checkbox one and done. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, mentoring can be informal or institutional. So this can be part of an academic program or a professional position in an organization, but it can also be a voluntary arrangement. So maybe you have a mentor, maybe you have a student that you is your mentee at your organization, but maybe you've also connected with someone at a conference or an association annual meeting that is a good fit and is seeking your help that you can potentially partner with. There's other organizations out there like Author Aid that help with mentorship pairing across countries and institutions. When you're with an institutional mentorship, the institution is often setting the roles, the relationship and boundaries, the goals, the expectations, the modes of interaction, and time commitment, and when the program will ultimately be completed. But it's important that you, as mentor and the mentee, have a great relationship to discuss the specifics, including those goals and expectations and how you prefer to interact and communicate. So there might be a more formal process outlined that you can weigh into. Next slide, please. With an informal mentoring, this might be someone that's outside of your team and is more informal. And this is up to you as the mentor and the mentee to set the roles, the boundaries, the relationship goals, expectations, and how you prefer to interact. And again, this might have a more flexible timeline of how long this mentorship will continue, but it's important to be clear on the goals and what you expect to get out of it in order for that partnership to be successful. Next slide, please. So, what behavior is expected of supervisors and students? Um, You'll want to look for information to learn about the roles, norms, and expectations from your organization as a mentor and learning about the accountability and protocols for both the supervisor and the student. Like I talked about, discussing your work styles and communication preferences, your needs, your vulnerabilities, asking questions is incredibly important. And showing up prepared, on time, being responsive to comments, being open, respectful is all very important. And so that's something that you bring forward from your classroom into this mentorship partnership. Next slide, please. Um, so another question we often get is how do you find research partners in your area of specialties who will be able to work with you from other countries when conducting research? So this This is often for students or early career researchers who are looking to partner and find co-authors. Maybe you aren't able to be a co-author as a mentor, but this is important to briefly touch on is that mentors and partners are slightly different. So if you're looking for a research partner or a co-author, that is different than a mentor. And that's okay for today's conversation. I do want to touch on this. Um, Mentors guide and assist others on the project, and it can be within or without of the scope of that particular project. Um, Whereas, like co-authors, the responsibilities are very clearly defined, and they may not always provide the same guidance that you might expect. Um, in order to do some networking, we have some great webinars on this, but I encourage you to find and join professional societies or discussion groups that serve your specialization to locate and connect with research partners. And if you are looking for a specific mentor, so if you're a student here today looking for a mentor, consider an NGO like Author Aid who can connect researchers with volunteer mentors. And then also check to see what your institution or organization already offers. Maybe there is a mentorship program available, or maybe there's someone in your department who might be able to serve as your mentor. And then remember, your mentor can help potentially connect you with others who might be good research partners. Next slide, please. This dives in a little deeper, but we often get questions on, do you need a scientific advisor? And um, so if you are a student and you're going through a program, it depends on the institution and its requirements. Um, a lot of times, yes, you do need a scientific advisor or a PI if you're conducting research. Um, but to expand on this a little bit, another question we often get is, do I always need to do my research being employed by an organization? So if you are a student and you're looking at your next steps and opportunities, independent research is becoming more accepted and respected. So, independent research is something conducted outside a research agency, organization, or academic institution. But new independent researchers do need to build credibility, and having a reputable scientific advisor can help. Um, if you are going to explore this path post-graduation, so if you're a student listening in today, having a mentor or someone to guide you that's familiar with independent scholarship would be beneficial because without an institutional affiliation, funding can be challenging, and you might have to find an agency that does grant management. So these are all things to take into consideration, and you, as faculty or mentors, when you're helping your students move on to those next steps in their career, it's important to keep that in mind. We do also have a webinar coming up in July on conducting independent research. All right, next. So, with that, I wanted to briefly pass this over to Mary and then Kevin to talk through some of their tips, tricks, insight on how faculty and mentors can help students and provide some of their experiences before we open up the Q&A.
Hello, hello everyone. Yes, I thought I would talk about an experience I had, which I think complements some of the things that Jessica's been talking about. When I was first working in an academic department, and I was also a PhD student, myself and a colleague got involved in a writing development project. So at the time, our department was under pressure to increase our publication output. And so we thought we'd look at what ways we could use to try and facilitate this. So we started off by holding an open meeting with our colleagues, and we asked them to talk about what they felt helped their writing and publication and what they felt hindered it. And the meeting came up with a lot of things that Jessica's just talked about, actually. And from that, what we developed was a kind of two-strand strategy. So the first strand was about improving the departmental culture for writing, because one of the things that people said was like they felt guilty if someone saw them in the office reading a journal. They felt like it wasn't valid work, but of course, you need to read and in order to help your writing. Um, and so we came up with ideas like yeah, trying to normalize reading and writing as a central part of academic work. Also, being a bit more open about successes. So we had a notice board that we put up articles that people had got published, and we had a agenda item in our department meetings where people could mention progress they'd made with articles submitted or published. And we also developed a buddy system where we got people who were interested to buddy up with a colleague and work together to try and and plan and achieve certain publication goals, so they could set themselves deadlines, for example, and discuss progress they'd made and problems that they'd come up with. So that was the part around the department, which was basically trying to increase the value attributed to writing. And the second part was around improving people's knowledge and skills in the area. And that took the form of a monthly workshop that we set out. And we had a few different sort of sessions. So for some, we invited people in. So we had a couple of editors of relevant journals for our discipline. And that was really useful, hearing them talk about what they were looking for in articles. And we also had someone come and talk about the writing processes and common problems with writing. And then we had quite a few practical sessions where we did things like, for example, we'd select some examples of abstracts that had recently been published, and we got people in pairs to look through the abstracts and review them and try to identify what they thought made for a really good abstract. And then people would have a go at writing their own abstracts, and then we could review those. We also had a session where we got copies of several relevant journals, and we had people again in pairs looking through the journals, trying to identify like what was the format of a journal, what was the style they expected, what were the kinds of articles that were printed, what were their length, all this kind of thing. Basically, trying to familiarize ourselves with the kind of places we were going to be able to submit to see what would be a good match. And we also had people practice conference presentations, because presenting is often a good forerunner to then going on to publish, because it helps you to kind of summarize and identify the key messages that you want to get across. So the overall sort of aim and goal of this was to try and make writing a bit less lonely, to try and make the publication process a bit more open and clear, uh, and understand it better, and to provide some sort of structure a kind of peer support group, if you like, that would provide more structure to help people to publish. So I hope that some of those things might be relevant for you and your students.
Okay, is it my turn? No? Okay.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. And thank you. I'm really happy to share my experience with students. You guys are the next generation, and yeah, it's our obligation to help you eventually take our jobs, right? So, I don't know if I can easily do this. I'm going to try to share. If you have the slides and you want to just pull up very quickly slide 6. Aspects students struggle with. If you can, I can just talk through it. It has the 4 boxes, starting with selecting the right journal. And while you're doing that, so yeah, what I'm going to say is that I'll break it down into to 2 aspects. There's phase 1 of when you're a graduate student. The first phase is thinking through the end, right? And the end is getting your thesis accepted so that you can get your degree. And the easiest way to do that is to make sure that you're following the patterns and the expectations of your institution and your academic advisor and your graduate committee. That's the path that I was in, that we were all in. And so you should look towards those that have recently succeeded in satisfying the requirements of your institution, your advisor, and so forth. Use their thesis as a template for the kind of work you're going to do, the kind of writing you're going to do. It's an easy way. Now, what we're talking about is taking that thesis and taking your graduate work and now pivoting away from the expectations of your institution and to the expectations of a journal. And that is going to be this top box right here is really, really important. It's targeting the right journal, and selecting the right journal, and then really taking your work and formatting it and presenting it in a way that is acceptable to that journal and that scientific society. I'll start with saying what I don't recommend. What I don't recommend is blanketing many journals with the same manuscript. That almost never works. And we do get in our journal, we get manuscripts submitted that seemingly have no connection to our scope or what we do. We're in the Journal of Toxicologic Pathology, and they have neither toxicology or pathology in it. I don't even know why sometimes they sent it to us. So it's very easy to reject those because they're just wildly out of scope. So how do you get in scope, and how do you sort of find that format and preparing the manuscript in a way? This is the hard part, I think. The first step is, just like I said, about you can go and you can look at the graduate students who've just finished ahead of you, the thesis that just successfully defended. You can look at the journal and look at the journal that you're targeting to publish in. Is it a very specific niche journal like my journal, or is it a more broad scientific journal? Probably early on in your career, you're probably going to be more successful with the niche ones that are specific to your scientific discipline. I think that's a fair statement, and I welcome Mary to comment on that as well. But so then you can look in there and you can see, well, what's the writing style? What are the things that are important? In addition to, reading the scope statement of that journal is very important. Looking through a couple of recent issues and the style that they had, and what are the things that really jump out at you as important. So using an example again, my journal, Toxicologic Pathology, pathology is a very image intensive journal. We have a very, very high demand and expectation for excellent quality images that are, as we call them, of diagnostic quality, that a practitioner in the field can instantly look at that image and render a diagnosis. And we don't have to struggle with poor quality images. So that's the starting point. And then formatting it and building it on the scholarship and the science and the references that are already in that journal. Look through, like, little hint, right? Referencing other publications in that journal that are the precursor to your scientific question. So here's a really helpful hint, I think, about getting started. Again, if you target a specific journal and a specific scientific field, um, go to their scientific meeting. Almost all these organizations have meetings, right? And in addition to having platform presentations, most have poster presentations, and most of those poster presentations very much welcome, as we do, very much welcome student presentations. So if you have something that you think, oh, this would be a good manuscript, boil that manuscript down to a poster presentation, which should be really not much more than 2 or 3 main points and conclusions. You just don't have enough room in a poster for much more. And then put that together and ideally go to that meeting, present that poster, and get some feedback from the attendees. You get poster sessions, you get people walking around, they ask you questions, and you sort of get a sense of what makes sense and what is maybe not so clear. And then from there, you can build on that experience, right? You can say, can I turn this poster into a manuscript? And you can start asking other attendees. So this is where I really like having a mentor-mentee relationship. This is where you bring in somebody who has already been through this process before you. Look for a faculty member or a society member or professional organization member who has already gone down that road and say, hey, can you help me on this? Or ideally, hopefully you're doing this in the research phase too, but maybe now you need it in the publishing phase. So I'm going to sort of, those getting started in those phases right there is really the most important. The peer review process and the managing revisions process, that will follow. That will, the editorial team, people like us, we're gonna walk you through that. You don't really have to have in-depth knowledge about those things just now. Right now, as students and as trainees, your job is to learn how to create scientific content and learn how to write it up and communicate it in a way that makes sense to colleagues in your field. So I'll stop there, and then I'll let us continue on with the presentation. And you can leave that slide up or not, as you see fit, Jessica.
Thank you, Kevin. I think our next move is actually to go into today's Q&A, but quickly before that, and sorry for moving through these slides very quickly, just pulling up this slide here to say that today is our first webinar of the year, but we've got a lot coming up. So anybody here today who is studying sociology or a sociologist, we have a webinar next week. On February 4th, we're very excited to have a speaker coming in from the Wikipedia Foundation. So this will be about how to get cited, how to increase your citations, and potentially how to get reach on Wikipedia. So lots coming up. Keep an eye on this, and we'll send these over to you after the call as well. Noting that Sage has an entire platform with lots of guidance for authors, our information for Authors Hub. It's a dedicated space, so if you have any questions about the publication process, really this is the best spot to get started. And I'll keep this on the screen as we move into our first question. We have a quarterly author newsletter where we send guidance and publishing resources and also updates on our upcoming webinars. So if you're interested, please feel free to scan this QR code and sign up today. And I'll leave this up for our first question, which is a great question from our audience, which asked, how can I identify that a dissertation has impactful results and can be transformed into an article or into a series of articles? I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on this one.
I can start us out if you'd like. So I think that this goes back to the basics of publishing and thinking about the impact that your work is having. So focusing on your discipline, right? Who is this impacting within your discipline and even outside the discipline, the general public or the public at large? And what impact is your dissertation going to have on the field or the greater field? Is it original? Is it novel? What does it add to the existing literature? What does it build upon? Does it prove an existing theory? Um, does it, do you have a new theory that you're trying to prove? And thinking about what is the goal of your research and who is it going to impact? So going back to those key core questions. the one thing with dissertations is that they are very, very long. They tend to be very long, and it includes just about every piece of information that an institution or a supervisor is looking for, and you don't necessarily need to publish all of that. So we actually have a whole webinar on how to condense your dissertation or thesis into a publishable manuscript. But this is where you might rely on your mentor, your supervisor, some of your colleagues to help you brainstorm on what is impactful, what is novel, what is original, and then thinking about what journals would you publish in and what audience are you trying to reach to help ultimately narrow that down into an article. I don't know if Mary or Kevin, if you want to add anything to that.
I'll add. So yeah, I mean, science is by its nature, right? We are constantly building on those before us, right? We are constantly we're advancing the field, and the easiest way to do that again is be very in your putting together a manuscript. Be very very thoughtful about your introduction and the references that you use. They really do need to be up to date and current. And you really need to be citing if you're in a really, really fast moving field, then the challenge is greater for you. Some fields don't move as fast, but if you are, no matter what, you got to be able to cite the most recent up to date literature on that topic and how are we advancing the next step.
Hmm. Actually, one or two journals I've seen actually have a box that you have to write as part of a journal that where you have to say what's known already on this topic and what this paper adds. And that really does focus you very clearly down to making sure, as Kevin says, that you know what's known already from the literature out there. And secondly, what's distinctive about what you're adding. And I think don't expect that it has to be something groundbreaking. Not many people are going to be publishing something really groundbreaking, and certainly not early in their careers. But if you add a little something, something that adds to the depth of knowledge in a certain area, that's enough.
I just wanted to add one more thing that I thought of, um, focusing on the methodology. One of the biggest reasons for rejection that we see at journals is that maybe the methodology isn't as rigorous or strong as it should be. So, thinking about the methodology that you used and look at some of the journals to which you want to apply and what are you trying to prove and does that align with a lot of the best practices? Sorry, I just had another extra thought I wanted to weigh in on.
Thank you for that. I actually have a kind of a follow-up from the initial question. So, see some questions coming through about what to include in a thesis when you're publishing it as a manuscript. So when transitioning a thesis to a manuscript, what data should be included? Do you have any tips or best practice on this?
Enough that the reviewer can make their own scientific judgment as to the validity of the conclusion. That's a bit of a vague answer. If it's really really long, cumbersome data, you can look at the way the journal likes to present. Like most journals are not going to have page after page after page of just numerical tables, right? That we gloss over that, right? One trick that we use a lot, if you think it's really important, molecular data is a great example. Like seeing gobs and gobs of molecular data, right? One of the things that you can do is you can put that in supplemental files and include that in with the manuscripts again, so we can adjudicate whether or not the conclusions are we agree with the conclusions. But in the paper, you got to make it readable for somebody who only has 15 to 20 minutes to read your manuscript. Think about the audience in mind, right? Nobody's going to spend 2 hours reading one manuscript.
Yes, I'm trying to present data in interesting ways, visual ways perhaps, or ways that don't require, as Kevin says, lots and lots of long tables, but can be processed in a way that makes them easy to digest.
Great. Thank you. I have a really interesting question here about mentorship generally. So I'm wondering if you can distinguish between co-authoring a paper and supporting a mentee move their paper through the publication process. I've seen some comments coming through that mentors are not seeing their students successfully publish as easily when they're a sole author. So just any tips here, any thoughts, any areas for improvement, etc.
I can start us out if you'd like.
Go for it.
So I think the big thing that we want to focus on here is the criteria that defines an authorship. So if you're going to be a co-author on a paper, you'll want to meet the authorship criteria, and so you'll actively contribute to the scholarly content, the study design, the data analysis, the conceptual framing, drafting, writing, rewriting sections, or interpreting results. And then you, as an author, are sharing responsibility for accuracy, ethics, and intellectual contribution. So, by contrast, if you are just serving as a mentor on the paper, you might just be advising, helping someone identify publishable portions, guiding them on journal selection, organization, referring them to different methodologies, maybe helping them address reviewer comments. And then you can still be acknowledged, you can still be recognized in the acknowledgement sections on how you did help within the paper. Um, so before I move on to the second part about sole authorship, Kevin or Mary, anything you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Science is a team sport, right? And it takes a lot of people to put together a manuscript. We have different levels of responsibility. In the end, authorship means you are taking responsibility for the full manuscript, whether you're the first author or the last author or anything anywhere in the middle. And you will, in the end, you will sign your name saying you certify it as the integrity of that manuscript. The acknowledgement section works well for those that may have helped in revisions or useful suggestions, but don't rise to the level of authorship.
I also wanted to touch base on the sole authorship component of that. I think that it's not that sole authors, and Mary and Kevin, please jump in and correct me, but it's not that sole authors are necessarily rejected outright because they're sole authors. It has to do potentially with the content of the manuscript or the writing. Maybe it's really broad or too close to the thesis format. Maybe the methods and literature positioning are underdeveloped. Maybe they didn't respond to all of the peer review comments. Maybe it's not the best journal fit. Maybe there's some knowledge missing. So I would focus more on the overall manuscript writing process, journal selection process, data collection, data analysis, methodology, things like that, rather than sole authorship versus co-authors. I'm not going to say one is better or worse. I think there's advantages and disadvantages to to single authorship versus multiple authors on a paper. So
I
yeah, I
think it
wanted
might
to.
depend. I wonder if it depends a bit on the discipline as well, because I think, science tends to take place in large teams nowadays, whereas perhaps in some of the other disciplines, maybe humanities or arts or something, it may be more individual um, efforts are more usual. I'm not saying either one can't work in any discipline, but I think it may vary a bit between disciplines.
Great. Thank you. That was extremely insightful. Um, just filtering through the questions here, I see some interesting ones about the benefits of being a mentor. So I'm wondering if you could explain, are there, what would you say are the main benefits of being a mentor?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Kevin.
it keeps you on your toes for sure. You have an obligation if you're a mentor to make sure that your skills are worthy of the role. for sure. And if you're not, if they're asking you questions on something that's outside your field, you may have to defer to somebody else. So that be, is it a hard scientific question, or is it a more broader career type question, a softer question? But being a mentor it is very rewarding. It's very rewarding to be around students and again the next generation. Seems like it wasn't that long ago that I was a trainee and time has flown. And now that I'm working with trainees on a regular basis, it's really super rewarding to sort of help them. And as I say, I tell all my mentees, as I want you to someday take my job. That's the goal. So, Mary, you have anything to add? Yeah.
Well, I think you really covered it. It's both the personal satisfaction of those professional relationships that you're developing and helping to nurture younger colleagues, which is rewarding in its own right, and then the education it gives you, because students ask questions that make you think about things in a different way. It's the same as teaching. Teaching is the best way to learn. Uh, you learn so much from the things that your students ask you and contribute. Often they'll have much better knowledge of certain things than you do. So I think any kind of ways that you support students is always very beneficial to the person mentoring or helping. And in fact, I remember going to a conference of where some of the top publishing authors in Europe were talking, and it was very noticeable that all of them were very involved in teaching as well as publication.
That's nice to hear. And yeah, research does take a community, so it's always nice. Um, this is actually kind of shifting gears a little bit from the author perspective. Somebody's asked if you could explain the most common mistakes that lead manuscripts to be rejected, even when research data may be strong.
Hmm.
Do you want to start off, Kevin, or I can jump in?
Well, again, we do have a very high rejection rate in our journal, but the biggest one is it's out of scope. So if you pass that test, if you're in scope, then we start to look at the question of is the data, is there quality data? And the quality data in our field means, are you using good methods to collect your data, we use the term validated assays and so forth, standard nomenclature and things like that are unique to our profession. So are you creating data that is meaningful? And then again, on the writing part, like I had a question recently, like what about, English is not my first language. Can I get some help on that? And the answer is absolutely yes. Like if English is not your first language, then again, we say to authors that reach out to us and we'll help you. You guys Sage can tell you that they have English writing help for the thing. So again, the data is the basis of science, right? That generating good data. If you have good data, then you've got to tell the story about the data. And again, we'll help you tell the story. We can't, as editors of the journal, we can't generate data. That is solely your responsibility, 100%. We can, or you're missing data. We can point out that you're missing data, but it is solely your responsibility to produce good data. Then telling the story is the part that we can definitely help on that.
I noticed in the Q&A actually there were quite a lot of questions and comments from people who were quite frustrated that they'd submitted things and they'd been returned without even going to peer review. But I think you probably need to be aware that, journals get loads and loads of manuscripts and they can't send every single one out to review. So, there has to be a process of eliminating some, which again, is very much about, is it really suited to this particular publication? So it's been mentioned several times already, but really knowing what publications are in your field and what their requirements are, and then trying to find a good fit for your article is really important. And also sort of being aware, because there is a hierarchy of journals, obviously. There are some that are more difficult to get into than others, and some that are easier. So when you're starting out, I mean, we were sort of encouraging each other when we started out to start small with things like
Mhm.
if we saw an article in a journal that our research related to, we might write a letter to the journal and try and get a letter published where we'd comment and perhaps bring in something from our research that related to the article that being published. Um, or sometimes journals have what we call filler articles, which, there's a bit of space left over and they have a little article. For example, when I was working in medical education, one of the journals had something about a memorable patient. So it was just um, a small thing to write, that didn't require a lot. But if people could sort of submit something and get it accepted in a small way to start off, I think that gives you confidence and it helps you to try and establish what area you're in and be aware of what level you're at as well. That you're not going to get into nature on your first article. You're going to start with something perhaps in a lesser journal, but still it's good experience and it's getting your foot in the door and getting to understand the process.
Yep. And this goes back to my suggestion of again doing posters at the
Yeah,
society. For that, it's the same
yeah,
idea.
yeah,
You're small, condensed,
yeah,
working your way up.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think it's important to note that rejection happens to everybody. It happens to people who are brand new. It happens to editors, happens to everybody, and it is normal and to be expected. So don't be too discouraged. Um, with that, I think we've got time for one last question. And Mary and Kevin, I'm particularly keen to hear your thoughts on this. What professional advice can you give to an academic who wants to publish as a first author for the first time, but has doubts about their ability to and maybe the quality of their manuscript? Do you have any tips here?
Hmm.
I mean, the first author is obviously the key person who's, well, normally the key person who's written the article and, been involved in all stages. But obviously they'd have to be sure that all the authors are happy with what they're publishing. And there's a lot of stages before you get to that. So, as we've said, conferences are a good way to check out ideas, and I'm sure Kevin can say a lot more.
Yeah, yeah, and again, we accept and we want, the graduate student who was the heart and soul of that research to get first authorship credit. We want credit to be go to where credit is due. And so, sometimes you look at that last name in the list of authors, right? And that certainly helps if you have a professor who is well published in the field to sort of again get it into the journal that he or she is familiar with. Um, so again, I guess the answer to the question is right. I mean that's great. Go for it. Work with somebody again. Target your journal. Work with somebody who is ideally very familiar with that journal. One hint is again, you can look through things like the editorial board and see if you can find a connection on the editorial board. It's of your academic advisor and somebody on that editorial board and get advice from them as well on your publication. I hope that's helpful advice.
Very helpful. Thank you very much. And with that, we are at time, so we'll be wrapping up today's webinar. I want to let everybody know who is attending live that you will receive a certificate of attendance nearly immediately after this call ends. So keep an eye out in the email that you signed up today, in the inbox there. It will be coming from from address that includes the word virtual badge. So keep an eye on that. Um, we hope to see you in a future webinar. But thank you very much today to Jessica, Kevin, and Mary for your discussion and all of your insights. Thank you to everybody joining us live and for sending over all of your questions. We hope to see you in a future webinar. In the meantime, please take care and thank you.